In this video, we're going to take a look at reasoning inside of algebra and geometry. To get us started, we're going to take a look at some of the properties of equality, and these are going to be properties that you've used before in Algebra 1. First of which is the addition property of equality. That just tells us that we can add something to both sides of an equation. The subtraction property of equality tells us that we can subtract something from both sides of an equation. The division property tells us we can divide both sides of the equation by a number, and the multiplication property tells us that we can multiply both sides of an equation by a number. So, taking a look at an example, which property of equality was used on each step to solve the equation below? And I've organized this to where you have the original equation, and then I have step 1 written, so we've done something to go from the original equation to step 1. Then I have the result written, and then step 2 shows us what we're doing to the result, and then the result of that. So step 1, what did we do to the original equation to get to step 1? And the answer is, if you look at it, it was 3x minus 5, but now it's 3x minus 5 plus 5. And it was 13, now it's 13 plus 5. So what we've done is we've used the addition property of equality. Alright, let's look at the second step. So after we added 5 to both sides of the equal sign, we ended up with 3x equals 18. And then to get to step 2, we divided both sides by 3. So what we did on step 2 is we used the division property of equality, because the division property of equality tells us that we can divide both sides of an equation by a number. So division property of equality. And there you go, we've labeled the properties of equalities that we needed to use in order to solve an equation. Now we're going to get to an example for you to work, but before we do, I'd like to make a note that oftentimes the actual math is left off of these problems and you will see just the results. So to work these problems, you would just write the property that you used next to each of the results. So for example, to get from this step to the step below, we would have had to add 5 to both sides, in which case we would be using the addition property of equality. To get to the last step, so from 3x equals 18 to x equals 6, we would have used the division property of equality. So go ahead and take a look at that last example, and you tell me what properties of equality were used to get from the original equation down to the first result, and then down to the end or the final answer. Go ahead and pause the video, write out those properties, and press play when you're ready to see the answer. Alright, to go from 5x plus 2 equals 17 to 5x equals 15, we would have had to subtract 2 from each side, so we would have been using the subtraction property of equality. To get from 5x equals 15 to x equals 3, we would have had to divide both sides by 5, so we would have been using the division property of equality.